All right, I think it's time we get this thing started. Welcome everyone to our 2021 Quarter One New Feature Roundup. This is the first in a series of quarterly webinars that I'll be hosting that will allow me to just walk through some of the recent features we've released over the past 3 months, just for anyone who hasn't been following some of the new features we've been releasing, or if you don't read our release notes or check out our release landing pages on our website with each new release, this will be a great opportunity for you to learn some of what we've been doing over since the start of 2021. So I am Sam Taylor. I'm ForeFlight's videographer and senior marketing specialist. I've also been involved in almost all of the webinars we've done up to this point, and I'm also the one who produces most of our tutorial videos. So you might recognize my voice from some of those videos if you've watched any of them. So before we get started with some of the demonstrations, you can ask any questions you want via the GoToWebinar message panel on the right. And I will be monitoring those questions as they come in as best I can. And if I see one that is relevant to the feature that I'm discussing at that point, I'll go ahead and respond to it. If it's not directly relevant to the feature, don't feel at all hesitant to ask the question, fire away. And we have some other support staff on the call, on the webinar rather, who will be responding to other questions. So I encourage anyone who has any sort of question about anything to go ahead and submit it as soon as you think of it. And if any of your questions aren't answered, you can, of course, email our support team and they'll provide you with a good answer. So if you have any audio problems, we strongly recommend you join from a computer and not a mobile device. I'm hoping that there won't be too many this time just because I'm doing it live this time. But if you do have any audio problems, again, I would say join from a computer. And if you are on a computer, try refreshing the webinar, and sometimes that helps. Finally, this session will be recorded and it'll be accessible at foreflight.com/onfrequency. So here are some of our topics for today. Before I get into our releases, I want to briefly introduce you to our spring promo, which is happening right now, and as well as our ForeFlight flyout contest, which if you're in the US, you can participate in this, and there's some great prizes that you can win. And then after that, I'll move through the January release, the February release, and the March release in sequence, and just briefly look at each of the major features and provide a quick demonstration of each of those. I'd like to get this whole thing wrapped up before 3. I could probably talk about these features for 2 hours if I wanted to, but I'm going to try to keep it brief for your sake. So let's get started by looking at the ForeFlight Spring promo. This is something we're doing just in conjunction with Sun and Fun, but anyone can use it. You don't have to go to Sun and Fun. Anyone, anywhere. You can be in Europe, in Canada, or in the US. So what you can do is before Monday the 19th, next Monday, if you upgrade your subscription plan to Pro Plus, if you're on a lesser plan than that, or Performance Plus, if you're on Pro Plus or below, then you will get extra months added to your subscription for free. So you just visit foreflight.com/buy. You have to do this through our website. You can't do it within the app. You go to foreflight.com/buy, select the plan that you want to upgrade to, and then enter the code shown there. So you enter Spring 2021 Perf. That's not case sensitive. It can be lowercase if you wanted to. And that'll give you 3 months extra if you purchase Performance Plus, or you can enter Spring 2021 Pro and you'll get 2 months extra with Pro Plus. Now, something to note is that this promo is not supported for renewals of the same plan. So if you're on Pro Plus, you can't get 2 months free by just renewing your plan. You would need to move up to Performance Plus and you would get those 3 months free. And like I said, it's valid only on the website through the 19th. So if you're interested in just earning some free months with ForeFlight, I would strongly recommend you go check this out and make that upgrade. Next up, we've got the ForeFlight flyout contest. What we're doing, this is actually something that is split into 4 different regions around the country, and it'll be going through, I believe, through August 1st. That's when the grand prize drawing will be. We're starting out with the ForeFlight Southern region, and you can see all of the airports that are participating in this marked there on that map. So basically how it works is you just go and you fly to any of these airports while recording a track log, and we will just automatically know that you landed at that airport. And if you do land at that airport while recording a track log, then you will be entered to win the prize. And every single time you land at any of those airports, you can land at the same one over and over again if you want to. We will be, each one of those landings will count towards your chances of winning. We also, at each of those locations, have partnered with an FBO, and so they will have some of our ForeFlight swag on hand. You can get some of those keychains that you all love, or the pens, or stickers, anything like that. So definitely check out the FBOs, and you can learn about which FBOs are participating by visiting foreflight.com/fly-out, and that has more information on the contest, all of the airports, all of the FBOs. And as well, you can download a content pack, which is what you can see on the map there. And so that actually places markers at all of the airports that you can visit. We will be doing monthly drawings for this, as well as one grand prize drawing on August 1st, and the winner will receive, I believe it's a year free of Performance Plus, a Century, and possibly an iPad, I think. It's some good stuff. So you all should definitely check it out and consider flying to those locations. All right, so let's get started with the January release. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about here is the new traffic alerting behavior. If any of you have flown with an Adsb device like Sentry, you've possibly seen some of ForeFlight's traffic alerts. They're really useful for just making sure you're aware of any potentially hazardous traffic that's coming towards you. But the way that it was before was it was basically just looking at any aircraft that came within a certain distance of your aircraft and alerting you based on that. So it wasn't very smart in terms of looking at the aircraft's direction of flight or their speed. And the big thing we've done with this is sort of inspired by TCAS systems. We've made the traffic alerts account for other aircraft's direction and speed of flight, and then provide earlier and more relevant alerts as a result. So this isn't something that I can directly demo on an iPad right now because of course I'm not flying, but what I do have are some of these images of what these traffic alerts look like. So one of the big changes is that there are actually now 2 levels of traffic alert. You can see that there's a yellow and a red traffic symbol in that image, as well as of course the regular blue color traffic. So the yellow is the lower alert level and the red is the higher alert level. The way this works is that any traffic target that within the next 45 seconds will come within 2 nautical miles and 1,200 feet vertically of you will be colored yellow. That's the lower level of alert. The higher level is if that aircraft within the next 25 seconds will come within 1.3 nautical miles and 1,200 feet vertically. So it's an interesting way of looking at this, where rather than looking at where each traffic target is right now, we're looking at where it will be relative to you, up to a minute in the future. So that's really what's determining how we alert you about these traffic targets. And a great image to represent this is this image, which is actually, it's a simulator, so this is not a real image taken during a flight. But what you have here are 8 traffic targets that are stationary at that point, and they're all moving at the same speed, but what's different is that they're moving in different directions. And so you can see, based on how those different lines are colored, where the traffic targets will receive the lower level of alert and get colored yellow, or receive the higher alert and be colored red, based on your direction of movement north as you're looking at this image. So this is the sort of feature that you don't really know, you don't need to know how it works, because it should just work, without you needing to know about it. But if you've received any traffic alerts in the past couple months, then perhaps you've noticed that they've happened maybe a little bit earlier, or for aircraft that were maybe a little bit further away. But that's really the purpose of these, is to make sure that we're providing you with this safety enhancing information earlier and for aircraft where you really need to know about it. All right, so moving on, we're going to look at approach minimums in Procedure Advisor. I'm going to switch over to my iPad here. Now, this is a performance only feature, one of the only ones actually we'll be looking at today, which is performance only. But the way to use this is when you've got a route entered on the map, I'm going to tap Procedure here to open Procedure Advisor, and I'm going to tap Approach. You can see that some of these runways are closed, of course, because there's a flying going on at Lakeland. But I'll go ahead and select the ILS into runway 9. I'll just do vectors to final there. And now you can see just below vectors to final, you've got this minimum altitude field. And so what you can do here is, if I zoom in to the plate and I check on what the ILS minimum is, I can see it's 332 feet. So I'm just going to tap there and enter 332, close. And now you can see it's added this magenta label pretty much right at the end of the runway. I believe we place it at the missed approach point. And so this is a magenta label that just highlights what that minimum you entered was. So now when I add this to my route, you can see that it's right there on the map. So the big benefit of this is that when you're needing to quickly reference what the minimum is for whatever approach you're shooting, you don't have to go and zoom in to the plate itself every single time. You can just take a quick look at the end of your route to see what that minimum is. All right, so next up, we've got some daily and hourly weather improvements. Now, daily and hourly weather was a feature that we released. Let me go ahead and clear some of this stuff out. That. So daily and hourly weather was a feature we released in December, which allowed you to, it's a new general forecast with some aviation specific properties. So if I go ahead and tap on Houston, for example, let me go to weather, daily. In fact, I'm going to make this full screen just so it's a bit easier to see. Go down to daily, pull that up. So what we added in January was the ability to see both the sunrise and sunset times. You can see right where it says 7 p.m. just below that, it shows that the sunset time will be 7:47. So that's new. We also added the ability to see precipitation quantity. I need to go find it. Here we go. So if you look at the blue 73% rain percentage there, we show that there's a 73% chance of at least 0.1 inches of precipitation. So those are the only two things that we added with this, but I want to very briefly point out one of the greatest things about this feature, and this feature is available for anyone for all subscription levels. What you can do is, if you're on your home screen and you want to quickly see what the forecast is for your current location, you can tap hold on the ForeFlight icon and you'll see that there's this local forecast button, second from the bottom there. And if you tap that, it'll open ForeFlight to your exact location. That's one of the key things about this forecast. It's not tied to any airport. So it's not pulling like a METAR or a MOS forecast. This is actually a forecast that can work anywhere on Earth. And so in this case, it's looking at your exact latitude and longitude and pulling a 10-day hour by hour forecast for that location. So really, really useful way to quickly check on the weather if you don't want to go and open up one of those other weather apps that you might have. All right, next up, we've got Auto Center Internet Traffic. Now, if I go over to the Maps view here, I go ahead and turn on the Internet Traffic layer. This was a feature we released last year, I think, about July maybe. And of course, all of this traffic is coming from FlightAware. It's using the FlightAware feed. And so if I zoom in, I go ahead and tap on one of these. What you see now is that there's this reticle in the top right corner of those traffic windows. And so if there's a particular aircraft that you want to maintain within your field of view at all times, you want to keep it centered in the screen, you just tap that reticle and ForeFlight will automatically center on that aircraft, and it'll stay centered on it until you tap it again to disable it, or if you tap elsewhere on the map to disable it. So it's a small enhancement, but very useful if you're wanting to just continuously follow some particular traffic target. And there, I'll go ahead and turn it off. Let me turn off the traffic layer as well. All right, so last up is another feature that I'm not really going to be able to show you because it's more of a back-end thing, but we made a very important switch to using Jeppesen as our primary, or really our only source of NOTAMs. And this is significant because Jeppesen's NOTAM feed is just better curated, it's better managed than the previous one we've been using. So there were a number of benefits from this, especially for any customers who are flying to countries outside of the US, where previously we were missing many of the important domestic NOTAMs in those countries, whereas now we have much better NOTAM coverage in the following countries: South Africa, Central America, Cuba, New Zealand, Ecuador, Colombia, Brazil, Bolivia, Russia, India, Cambodia, Thailand, and Vietnam. And it's possible that in the future, Jeppesen will add support for additional countries on top of this. So again, if you only fly in the US, you probably wouldn't even notice this change at all, but it is a very important switch in terms of moving to a more reliable and just generally better source of data when it comes to NOTAMs. Let me take a quick look at some of the questions you've been submitting. So can you search for an N number and track it? Yes, you can, actually. So let me jump back to the iPad here. What I usually do is I'm just going to do this WA. So you can search for call signs or tail numbers, N numbers. And so if I just search this, it'll automatically bring up these Southwest flights. And it'll only show the ones that are currently in the system, you could say. So if you search for an aircraft that is not flying at the moment, then it's not going to bring up any of these results. But if you tap on these, it'll automatically enable the internet traffic layer and it'll take you there. So this one, oh look, this one's actually on the ground at Hobby, taxiing around. So yeah, that's one of the really great features of internet traffic here. You don't need to go to the FlightAware app to search for an aircraft and search for it in ForeFlight. You can just do it directly within ForeFlight. How can you share this video with others? Well, we are recording this video, and later today or tomorrow, it'll be available at foreflight.com/onfrequency, just embedded on that page. It'll also be on our YouTube channel, so you can just go to youtube.com/foreflight and send that link to your friends, and they'll be able to watch this as well. Glad you're enjoying it. Here's a good question. I've noticed that these alerts, referring to the traffic alerts, these alerts aren't produced when near an airport or in the pattern. And yes, that's by design, because what we don't want, we want the traffic alerts to be useful and to enhance your safety of flight, but we don't want them to become a nuisance, obviously. And if you're in the traffic pattern at an airport, there's a very good chance that you're pretty close to some other aircraft, not tremendously close, but close enough that you would probably be getting that traffic alert a whole lot more than you would want, because obviously you know that you're near aircraft, and so you don't want to be alerted about that all the time. So we do disable those alerts when you're close enough to an airport, just as a way to prevent that from becoming a nuisance. But good observation. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next release topic here. Oh, let's see, do it like that. There we go. So the February release had the new Maps sidebar. Let me switch back to iPad. So this was a really huge design change in terms of how you interact with the map in ForeFlight. And we've heard a lot of feedback from many of you about what you think about this feature. And as always, we take it into account as we continue development of the app. So let me go ahead and show this. If you just tap on an airport, rather than having that information pop up be just right in the middle of the screen, you get this sidebar on the right. And so this is a great way of really just keeping the map a little bit more cleaned up and making sure that the information you want to look at isn't covering up the thing that you're trying to look at, which was a bit of a problem before. If, for example, I wanted to look at some Class C airspace, previously the pop-up would cover much of the airspace you're trying to look at, which was not very convenient. So in this case, it actually opens up that Add to Route window on the right, and now I can tap on each of these airspaces to highlight them directly on the map, and I can tap Details to dive into more details about that airspace. So this is a really useful thing when it comes to viewing airspace. And as you can see, it colors the entire airspace green. And also when you tap somewhere, you get that big, very visible green reticle on the screen. So that makes it easy for you to see where you had tapped. Another really big benefit of this is that once you've opened this information sidebar, you can actually continue to interact with the map. So you're not locked in place until you close the sidebar. You can keep moving around. You can even open many of the other Maps capabilities. I can open up a whole bunch of these things. I can change layers. I can make the screen just a total mess and then put everything back away. And the information sidebar is still right there. So the only way to remove the sidebar is to tap the close button in the top left, or just tap anywhere on the map where there isn't a thing that you can tap on, like an airport, and it'll go away. So it really is more of a semi-permanent sidebar rather than just a very temporary pop-up like we had before. Now, one other thing related to this, you can also, if you were to tap on some of these airways, for example, rather than that green reticle, you get this green line highlighting that airway, as well as if I were to tap on, for example, one of my route legs, it'll highlight that green as well. So obviously, these are line segments. They're not points, so we can't put a reticle on it. So that's why we highlight it green, but it works the same. You just have to tap away to dismiss it. Now, we did receive a lot of feedback. Some people were unhappy with the animation that happened when you open this up, especially on some older devices. I believe it's a bit more laggy and sort of stuttering. And we have taken that feedback into account, as we always do with any of your product feedback. And in fact, in the next release coming later this month, there will be some changes made to the behavior of the map sidebar that we hope will address most of the concerns people had with this new feature. So stay tuned and look forward to some of those changes if you're one of the people who had some qualms with this new feature, because once again, we absolutely do always listen to customer feedback, and we really do implement that in changes to the app. Please show again how you got to local weather. Yep, I'll go ahead and do that once more. So from your home screen, you just tap hold on the ForeFlight icon down at the bottom there. And you can do this on iPad or iPhone, it doesn't matter. You tap hold and you get this menu. And then you tap local forecast, which is the second option from the bottom. And when you do that, it'll just, and ForeFlight doesn't have to be open before you do this. If it's completely closed, it'll just open up and show you this. But again, this is just the easiest way, no matter where you are, to see a 10-day forecast for your current location. Definitely a really great, convenient feature. What's the best way to see that we have the current version in the iPad? So anytime you want to see what ForeFlight version you have, you just tap More in the bottom right, And then down here, you tap About. For most people won't see the diagnostic button there, so the About button in the bottom right there will be the lowest option in the More menu. And when you tap that now, you can see that the version number is visible in the header of the About section. So you just look there, you see it's 13.2.1, and you could go to foreflight.com/releases, which is where we list all of our app releases, all of the major ones at least. We wouldn't list the .1 there, but you can go there and confirm that that is in fact the most recent app version. I think another useful way of doing this is if you go to support, just above the About menu, we've got this useful page, and you can actually tap what's new there. It's the second option from the bottom, and that'll take you to the web page for the most recent release. Does the new traffic alerting work with all Adsb receivers? Yes. And in fact, not only Adsb receivers, but FLARM receivers as well. That's used by a lot of glider pilots. And so anything that delivers traffic information to ForeFlight will work with the new traffic alerting. So it doesn't matter if you have a Garmin, a Stratus, Sentry, one of those FLARM devices, whatever, as long as ForeFlight is getting that traffic information, then it will use that new traffic alerting algorithm with it. How can I change the weather forecast to Celsius instead of Fahrenheit? So this is something anytime you want to change one of the units that ForeFlight uses, whether it's speed, distance, weight, temperature, you just go to More, you go to Settings in the top right, you scroll all the way down to the very bottom of the page, and at the first or the second item under Preferences there is Unit/Time. And if you tap in here now, you can adjust any of these to fit your preference. So this is a really useful page to know about if you want to change any of these units that ForeFlight displays information using. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on now to the next feature from the February release, which is renaming imported documents. This one's pretty simple and easy to show, thankfully. If you go to Documents, you can see here I'm in the Imported section. So any documents that you import through, for example, sending them via AirDrop, or if you send them to yourself in an email and then import them to ForeFlight that way, they'll be added to the imported drive. And these are the only documents you can change the name of. So if I go into any of these other drives, I don't have the option to change the names of any of these because these are sort of the documents that ForeFlight is providing. So we're the ones who set the name. But if you've imported any documents, you just tap Edit at the top of the screen. And now you can see on the right, you have rename buttons next to all of these documents. So you just tap on one and you can enter the new name, hit save, and that document gets renamed and then moved to the new location. I believe this is alphabetical, isn't it? So moves to its new location in the list. Then you tap done. And this change will be reflected for that document if it's added to any binders. So for example, if it were up here in this binder, the name would change here as well because they're not different versions of the same document. They're just sort of different references to the same document. So that's a feature that's been requested for a long time and really useful if you're wanting to rename some of these documents that you've imported. All right, and last up for February, this is something that'll mainly be of interest to any European pilots or other pilots outside of the US who are on the webinar today. So I'll keep it fairly brief because we usually don't have too many of them. But what we did with this was if I go to the imagery view, and of course, if you haven't used the imagery view very much, this is a really great tool for short and long-term weather planning when you're getting ready for a flight. It's really a great supplement to some of the forecast layers you can access on the map, and just provides a huge wealth of weather information and forecasts for many different parts of the country. But in this case, I'm looking at the US imagery. So if I tap the regions button in the top left, I move back out to see all regions. And what we did here, if I go into Europe, was we actually put all of the Europe imagery in the same region, which is sort of how you'd expect it to be. But before this change, it was all split up into Northern Europe and Southern Europe and Western Europe and all these different sections. So we just went ahead and congregated all of these in the same region, so you can very quickly move through these different places in Europe to check out these different weather charts. All right, let me take a quick look again at some of these questions. I think we're running pretty good on time here. We've just got one more release to look at. How can I search? So how can I search documents from the document tab without pulling up data on airports, airways, and locations? So that's a good question, and it highlights what normally would be a great benefit, which of course is that ForeFlight's universal search will search for anything, whether it's an airport or a route or an airway, an aircraft registration code. And so if you search for any of those from any of the places in ForeFlight, or at least the documents view, the maps view, the airports view, and the plates view, it'll search all of the other pages. But generally the way it works and the way it should be working is if you're on the documents view and you search for a document, it will prioritize results which are documents. So for example, what's a good, here's handler info. So if I search, come on, handler, there we go. You can see that there are other results that'll come up, mainly Chandler in this case, but the first result will be from the documents view because any document results will try to be prioritized within the search. The same applies to any of the other places. So if maybe, well, let's see if this works. There we go. So now we're on airports. I search handler, and it's going to prioritize those airports, which coincidentally are all called Chandler. But this is just a demonstration that ForeFlight will prioritize search results for the page that you're currently viewing. How do I import a photo to documents? So you can import photos. You can import a lot of different types of files to documents in ForeFlight. And the easiest way to do that, if you don't have a Pro Plus subscription, so you don't have cloud documents, the easiest way to do it would be if you have another Mac device or another Apple device rather, you can airdrop it to your iPad. That's an easy way. You can also email it to yourself, and then you open up that email and you just do a little thing where you tap and hold on the photo icon, and then there should be an option to open it in ForeFlight, or I believe you have to tap the send to, and then ForeFlight should be in that list. But if you do have a Pro Plus subscription, it's even more convenient because you can link your Dropbox account, if you have one, to ForeFlight and then just add it to your Dropbox folder on your computer, and it'll just automatically import it into ForeFlight. But stay tuned in terms of importing documents to ForeFlight, because there are some changes coming to that in the near future that I think you'll be pretty excited to learn about. Here's a great question. What's the difference in traffic information we see with and without Sentry? So, and this, the answer I'm going to give here applies to any Adsb device, whether it's Sentry or Garmin device or anything. When you're not connected to any Adsb device and you look at traffic information, turn this on, all of this traffic information is coming from FlightAware. So this is their internet traffic feed. It's global. I can go and look at traffic anywhere in the world. Though sometimes it takes a minute to pop up. When you're connected to an Adsb device, such as Sentry, there we go, now we have some. So if I tap on the traffic target here, it's showing me information that's coming from FlightAware. So FlightAware can give me the tail number, or in this case, the call sign, the altitude, the distance from me, the heading, the speed, and it'll even interpret the call sign to kind of show you the expanded form of it. So in this case, it's KLM, Royal Dutch Airline, and it'll even show you the departure and destination airport if they filed a flight plan, an IFR flight plan, and FlightAware is able to find that. So lots of great information here. If you're connected to a Sentry, then we don't show any internet aircraft, because if you're connected to Sentry, you probably want to be receiving Adsb traffic rather than internet traffic, because that's much more useful for staying safe in flight and just for seeing who's around you. So that's why when you're using a Sentry or any Adsb device, you're not going to see this huge kind of global traffic layer. You're just going to see aircraft that are relatively close to you based on whether you have the Adsb out equipped and how close you are to some of the Adsb towers. If you're wondering how Adsb works in that case, and it's a very complicated system, I highly recommend checking out Sporties. They have a great series of articles, and especially one article that I'm thinking of that really it goes in depth in terms of the different ways you can receive Adsb traffic and how Adsb out plays into it. Like I said, it's very complicated, but you can probably just Google Sporties Adsb explainer or something like that, and it should be one of the first hits. And that's a really fantastic article when it comes to explaining that stuff. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on to, let's see, there we go, March release. So this was the most recent release, and the biggest new feature here, of course, is flight binders. And this is another kind of like the Maps Sidebar that I mentioned with the February release. This is a major UI change, which should really improve your workflow, especially when it comes to plates. So moving back to the iPad here, I'm going to go to the plates view. And I've already got this binder open. I'm actually going to move down to my plates here. So on previous versions of ForeFlight, this is what you would see in the plates view. All of your plates are just organized with no particular organization. You can go to edit and you can move these around, but basically the organization is just up to you. And that's how it was previously. The good news, if you preferred that and you don't like the flight binders that we put in at all, you don't like that new workflow, that's perfectly fine. You can completely ignore these flight binders and just continue using these plate binders the way you did before. So we're not changing any of this stuff. And of course, you can close this binder drawer by tapping close in the top left, and it'll go away. So this is exactly how it would have looked before. But there's a reason why you probably should use the new workflow, because it's much more automated and it's just much more fast and efficient in terms of getting ready for your flight. So I'm going to demonstrate this by tapping Add Flight Binder on the left there. And it will automatically pull suggestions from the maps view on the left. And if you remember, I had that Houston to Lakeland route entered here. So it'll just automatically pull in that route. And it'll also suggest the most relevant route from the flights view. So in this case, I have the Sugar Land to Austin flight on the maps view, or on the flights view. This one's actually from, let's see, a couple days ago, but essentially the closest flight, the closest future flight is what will be recommended in this case. So you can pick from either of these. I'm going to go ahead and tap the one from Maps. Now what that does is it automatically creates this flight binder for that flight. And if you remember on Maps, I had a departure and an arrival procedure entered here. And what that's going to do now is it will automatically select the plate for that departure procedure in the flight binder. So it's really smart that way. If you have any of those procedures entered, if I were to have an approach entered here, I'm just going to quickly pop back in and add one of these. Sure, yep. If I go back to plates, go back to add flight binder, and select the one for maps once more. Oh, that didn't work as I was expecting it to. I will look into that. But generally, it should add the approach. And of course, if you're on the flights view, the flights view will remove any approach procedure you've added because you can't file with an approach in your route. So that would be the expected behavior from that. What you can do now is you can tap on any of these procedure categories, these plate categories on the left to select new ones. So anytime I add a check mark to any of these, it'll add it to that flight binder. So these are all selected and they'll be in the flight binder. Deselect a few of them. And you can do this for all of the procedure types. Tap again. If I want to select any of the other departure charts, I can select them here. Same with approach. In this case, this would be sort of a emergency return scenario. If I need to make an approach right after takeoff, I can go ahead and do that. Oh, of course, that's why, shoot, you all were probably yelling at me as I was thinking that this had broken. It did go ahead and add the approach down here because, of course, this was the approach to Lakeland. Glad I caught that. But yeah, so you can just go ahead and add any of these like this. And you can still use the 3-finger swipe gesture. And if you didn't know about this before, this is a really useful gesture on plates. You just use 3 fingers and you swipe left and right. And sometimes it doesn't quite work. There we go. Oh, of course, I couldn't go any further that way. So now I can just swipe between all of these and it'll move between plates within a given section, but also adjacent sections. So you can start from your very first plate and swipe all the way to your very last plate in the flight binder just using that 3-finger gesture. So really useful feature there. Now, I have many flight binders here, as you can see, and you can very easily switch between them. If you're the kind of person who wants to plan out a bunch of flights in advance and get all of those flight binders ready, you can of course do that. But if you're the kind of pilot who would rather, just have only one flight binder and that flight binder is only going to apply for your next immediate flight, you can easily do that as well. So if you tap import, it'll automatically bring back up that import modal. So you can say, well, now I want to, set up this flight from Sugar Land to Austin. Tap there, and it'll just update the same flight binder with the new route. So you don't have to go back and add a whole nother flight binder if you just want to change the one you already have. You can also tap on these airports. So just above APT there in blue, I can tap on this and select any other airport that I want to fly to or from. So maybe I'll select Hobby here. And in this case, you can see it's already selected a number of plates, even though I don't have Hobby in any, well, I do have it on the map, I suppose, but one of the other things ForeFlight will do is if you previously selected any plates for a given airport, it'll automatically reselect those exact same plates the next time you set up a flight binder with that airport. So even if you don't plan to import your flights from the maps view or the flights view, ForeFlight is still smart about trying to select the plates that it thinks you're going to want to use again. Sorry, quick sip of water there. Let me take a look at some of these questions now. Do plates automatically get updated in the binders? So if you're referring to, for example, when a new data cycle comes out and there are updated plates, yes. As long as you download those new downloads that become available in the downloads view, it'll automatically switch those out so you don't have to worry about going in and making those changes. The one sort of edge case exception to this is if the name of the plate changes, then ForeFlight isn't able to correlate it with the previous one, and so you can end up with a situation where the plate will just continue showing as expired, but that doesn't happen very often, so it's usually not an issue. Other than plates, what documents can you add to a flight binder? So technically you can't add any documents to a flight binder. It's meant to be only plates. So pretty much anything, if I go to airports here, anything you could access from this procedure menu on airports, whether it's, many of these, technically are documents, for example, or not that one, but if I look at, here we go, these notes. So this is a document clearly, but it's grouped with the plates because it's relevant to, if you're using one of those airport diagrams, it would be useful to have these notes on the takeoff obstacles. But I can't just go and send one of these documents to the plate. The one exception to that would be if you were to import a PDF as a procedure using content packs, then you could actually associate that PDF with an airport and ForeFlight would treat it as a plate. That's way too complicated for me to explain in this video, but if you want to just do a Google search for ForeFlight content packs, and we have a great support article, very lengthy support article that goes really in depth on how to do that, how to turn the plate. You can even geo-reference the PDFs if that's something you want to do, and they will be geo-referenced when you import them into ForeFlight. So content packs are one of the really, really deep features in the app that takes a bit of time to learn and get proficient with, but once you do, it really opens up the flexibility of what you can do in terms of bringing your own content into the app. Really, really useful feature. How do you get the binder dialog again? So I'm going to go back to plates. You can get that binder dialog by tapping Add Flight Binder on the left, and whichever one you select, it'll just add a new one. Of course, you can also add an empty binder with nothing in it, and then select the airports. Or you tap Import at the top there, and it brings it back up. So those are the two ways you can bring up that dialog box. We're getting a bit short on time here, so I'm going to move on. Next up, we have expanded place labels. So this is another really, really great new feature. Let me go ahead and hide this. So before this update, ForeFlight had about 14,000 place labels. And after the update, ForeFlight has a total of 1.4 million place labels. So 100-fold increase in the number of place labels we have. And so that's going to be really useful for any pilots who frequently rely on these place labels to know where they are and as ground references. So the way to download the place labels now is the place labels are grouped with our high resolution base maps. Got to go way down. There we go. And so if you want to select the high resolution base map, it's automatically selected for your location. So if you're a pilot in the US using ForeFlight, it should be automatically selected here. But there, that download that I'm toggling on and off is the high resolution base map. So if you want to download it for any other region, like if you're going to fly to Canada, you want to go ahead and download that. And that is what will include all of those place labels. And because, of course, we don't want you to download all 1.4 million of them and then take up a lot of space if you're not going to be flying in, if you're not going to fly in Antarctica, then I recommend you don't download the high resolution base map for it because it takes up a lot of space. And with the place labels, the style is a little bit different than we had before. One nice thing is that we actually show, it might be hard to see there. Let me see if maybe I can change this to, maybe not, but you can see that each label actually has a dot kind of indicating the exact location. Before there weren't any dots, and so the label was just sitting on top of the location it was referencing. But that's one change. We also do a better job of having labels for bodies of water. There's like, let me go ahead actually, and the place labels do respond to the text size slider. So if you open up the map settings menu and you have the aeronautical map enabled, you can access the slider and change the size of all the text here. So now these are bigger. So we do a better job with highlighting bodies of water, rivers, lakes, ponds, reservoirs, whatever. And I believe we just highlight more small towns and villages, and that's especially important for any European pilots because things, let me go, see, this is the problem when you make this too big. There we go. Europe is quite a bit more dense than the US, and so this is something that European pilots have really been asking for a long time, is being able to have to more easily reference the names of some of these small towns and villages so that they can refer to them when they're flying. So that's one of the big benefits of these new place labels, is we do have many, many more places you can reference. I think that's most, oh yeah, the one other thing to say about place labels, I'm gonna turn this back to light. You can turn place labels on and off here. You can see this toggle right there. So if you don't want to see place labels at all, these other labels I have turned on are actually the artsy labels. So I'll turn that off. And now, so yeah, if you don't plan to be referencing these place labels and you think that they just kind of clutter up the map, which they certainly can if you have a bunch of other stuff turned on, then you can absolutely disable them and they won't be visible anymore. Come on, there we go. All right, next up, sending navlog and briefing to files in flights. This is going to be a pretty quick demonstration here. The files in flights, this is a feature that is performance only. So if you don't have a performance plan, you won't see this button. But if you look next to the briefing button, the briefing and the messages button, between those two, there's this file button. So this is just a way of essentially attaching documents to particular files rather than sending them to the documents view where they would appear in this imported list. And then it's kind of inconvenient to have a bunch of unsorted documents relating to different flights all piled into this one place. So the nice thing about files in flights is they're always associated with that one flight. And the new improvement here is if you have a navlog or a briefing, you tap the send to button in the top right, and you can see underneath copy there, you have save to ForeFlight documents, and that option has been there for a while, but you also have save to files, to flights files. Tap that, and it'll save that file to the flight and automatically add it here. And you can see that I was actually testing that before this webinar, so I already added one. I can just delete that. This works with the briefing as well, but a key thing to mention is this only works with the PDF briefing. So the HTML briefing that a lot of you might be familiar with, it does not, it's not a PDF, and so you can't send it to the flight's files because we don't at this moment support attaching HTML files to flights. So that's a key thing. This PDF briefing is great for other reasons. It has, for example, I think we did add this vertical cross-section chart to the HTML, but so if you're really looking to add some of these documents to the flight, you'd want to use this PDF briefing. And if you're wondering, which some of you may be, the setting for that is you go to settings, tap the filter at the top and just tap briefing, and now you've got briefing format. So you can select the PDF or the HTML or the super old text briefing, which I don't know why anyone would use that when we have some of these other options here. So, but anytime you're looking for a setting, it's really useful to use this filter just because it can very quickly, the settings list has grown quite a lot over the years. So it's nice to be able to just quickly filter it down to the particular keyword that you're looking for. Go ahead and get rid of that. And now we have the last two items here, which again, this is going to be mainly relevant for European pilots, but we did add some new charts for France and Germany. We've kind of slowed down in recent years in terms of adding new charts because we now have really good coverage of most of Europe. But we did, as new charts become available, we do still look for opportunities to add them and make them available for pilots. So in this case, if you turn on the Europe VFR map layer, This is essentially the layer that contains all of the VFR charts that are provided for free as part of our subscription. Many other charts you do have to pay for in order to get VFR charts for those other countries. But in this case, anything in this layer is just free. So we added these SIA charts for France. I believe these are both, what is it, 1 to 500,000 and 1 to 250,000, I believe. So as you zoom in, you can see that it'll actually change and display the higher resolution chart. And the one other thing we did for Germany, if I go look at one of these military airports, we added these new procedures. They're under the Bundeswehr heading down there. And so these are our military procedures, but they are publicly available. They're not classified or anything. So we just pull these from their location online and we can display them in ForeFlight. The one other thing here is within documents, if you go to Europe, we did actually add the AIP that's associated with these within our list of European documents. And it's in, there we go, German MIL AIP, whoops. So they're the three at the very top of the list now. So that's pretty much it for the past 3 months in terms of new features. It's a lot to get through, and boy, I really nailed it on the timing there, didn't I? I'm impressed. Let's see, I'll spend a few minutes more addressing some of your questions here. And again, if you don't get a question answered during this webinar, please email team@foreflight.com. We want to make sure that you really get all your questions answered. We don't want to leave any of you wondering about something. And our support team is rather renowned for being very responsive and really effective. It's one of the things we really pride just in general about us as a company. So please do email team@foreflight.com if you don't get a question answered, and we'll get back to you very quickly. But let me look through some of these questions and see which ones I want to answer. Are place labels available on all subscriptions? Yes. Yes, everyone has access to place labels, and everyone has access to the high resolution base map download. So doesn't matter what subscription plan you have, you can always go in and enable or disable that. Same with the high resolution terrain. Everyone can have those. How can you remove a country coverage that you do not need for now without deleting the whole data? So this would be a situation where, I mean, generally, if you want to remove some piece of data, you want to make sure that it's not still selected in your list of downloads. So for example, I've got the Gulf of Mexico. These would just be the oceanic chart selected, I believe. If I go down and find these in the list somewhere, I'm actually not going to take the time to do that because that's going to take a while to find. But if you still have that data, that chart or data download selected in your download settings, then when you delete the chart, it's just going to pop right back up. You see now I've deleted this chart and it just comes back. Actually, that one didn't, but this one will, because I still have it selected in download settings. So if you don't want that data anymore, you'll want to make sure you go into your download settings and deselect that item. In this case, I could either deselect all of Germany, or I believe in that case, I would need to deselect the AIP there, and that would get rid of that download. But generally, if you're going to be flying somewhere that you don't fly to very often, like if you're going to make a big cross country across a couple states and you just need to get data for that one flight, that one-time flight, we would recommend you use the pack feature. So if you open the flight plan editor and you tap that suitcase button, that brings up pack. And so this is something that analyzes your route and downloads all the data you need for that flight, but it doesn't really hold on to it for too long. So after that data expires, when those charts expire, it'll just remove them from your device and not continually re-download them. So we suggest that you only select the data downloads for places that you're going to be regularly flying in, and then PAC will take care of everything else for some of those just one-off longer cross-country trips. How can I increase the place label font size? Right, so you tap the map settings button next to FPL. And if you have the aeronautical layer turned on, you'll have this text slider, and I don't have place labels turned on. Here we go. And you can change the text that way. This requires the aeronautical map, and so if you don't have one of the plus subscriptions, if you're still on one of the old basic or pro plans, then I don't believe you'll be able to access this actually. So that's a good reason to upgrade to Pro Plus or Basic Plus or above, because then you get the aeronautical map and the option of changing the font size for all this stuff. How do you manually start and stop track logs? Good question. So I'm going to open up this map settings menu. If you haven't spent much time looking at this, you're really missing out, because you want to understand all of the features that are in here. Some of the best features for the ForeFlight map are contained in here, like the map overlays. You can adjust overlay opacity. The layer selector, this is a hugely valuable feature that we introduced last year that allows you to make multiple map selections without the whole thing disappearing every time you tap something. Super useful. So all of that can be found in the map settings menu. Definitely check this out. But the particular question about track logs, if you go down to map overlays, you see just above map touch action at the very bottom, you've got track log record button. So this exposes this REC button on the left, and I can tap it to manually start a track log, and I can tap it again to stop that track log. Now, if you have auto track log enabled, so I'm going to go to more, and here again, you'll see the value of this filter. I just search track log, there we go. So I've got the start stop control enabled. This is the same switch again, but it's just in the settings view now. And I've also got enable auto start stop. So this is a handy feature where ForeFlight will essentially detect when you've started a flight, and it'll automatically initiate that track log and begin recording it. And then it'll also try to detect when you've stopped the flight, when you've landed and come to a complete stop, and it'll end the track log. It's not always perfect in terms of getting it totally lined up. Sometimes it'll capture some of your taxi, sometimes it'll capture your drive home occasionally, but we are always working on improving the algorithms that ForeFlight uses to try to guesstimate when you've started or stopped a flight. But if you've got the memory to always remember to manually start and stop it, then that would be the way to get the most accurate track logs. It's just making sure you always hit the record button before you start taxiing, hit it again when you come to a complete stop to turn it off. Thanks, Phil. Glad you enjoyed the presentation. Let's see. Can you add more than one track log to one flight? Not at this time. So any flight will always be associated with only one track log in terms of your logbook, but that's something we are working to further develop. Is there a setting for the PAC corridor width? No, there is not. There is a setting, of course, for the profile corridor width. So if you have a Pro Plus subscription, you can access this profile view, tap the settings button on the right, and you can change the width of the corridor that it's looking at for terrain and all this stuff. So if I go up to 20 nautical miles, it'll greatly increase the number of things that are shown, but this does not apply to PAC. PAC always, I want to say it has 25 nautical miles on either side of your route. You can see it here. Yeah, 25 nautical miles on either side of your route, and 50 nautical miles within, or 50 nautical miles within your departure and destination airport. It doesn't show it here, but it does look a little bit further out when you're close to your departure destination to download certain things like airport NOTAMs and airport forecasts. All right, I'm going to take a look at just a couple more here before I sign off. Okay, so when in flight, how do I input a new route and new destination from my present position? So this is a really useful feature. I'm not flying currently, obviously, but if I were, what you can do is at any point you can tap on, let's say I'm going to tap on that waypoint, and you have this direct to option. You're going to tap direct to, boom, and it just immediately replaces all of my route up to that waypoint with a direct line from my present location. And this is my present location, actually. It's not my departure airport or anything. It'll set up a direct route straight to the waypoint that you selected there. So really useful feature if you're shooting an approach, for example, and ATC just gives you vectors to final, and you can just skip the rest of the arrival procedure. You can just real quickly jump in, say direct to, boom, and you've replaced all of your route with just a direct leg. I missed the first part of the webinar. Will I be able to view it later? Yes. If you go to foreflight.com/on-frequency and you just scroll down the page, you'll see that we've embedded all of the webinars we've ever done in this series on that page. So sometime later today or tomorrow, this webinar, a recording of this webinar, will be embedded on that page. So definitely go check it out and share it with your friends if you think they would benefit from it as well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. This has been a blast just to run through these features. I'm really looking forward to doing it again for Q2. So you can learn about any of our releases at foreflight.com/releases. That's a really, really useful page if you're not up to speed on all of the new features we've added. Just go there, and it's a big list of all of the releases we've ever done with links to view the particular release pages with things like videos and descriptions for all of those features. So really, really worth checking out if you're wanting to get up to speed on some of our recent features. You can learn about that spring flyout that I mentioned at foreflight.com/fly-out. Just go there and you can download that content pack I showed. You can see what airports and FBOs are included in the contest and just learn about when we'll be moving to some of those other regions around the country. Like I just said, you can go to foreflight.com/on-frequency to see a recording of this webinar and register for some of the other ones. You know, this week we have daily webinars for Sun and Fun. We're not there in person, but that's why we can do these every single day. So if you're not there in person, then that's great. You can just watch these webinars and get some of the experience. Not really, but it's what I'll tell myself. So I think, what are the ones we have coming up here? Tomorrow is going to be the Rusty Pilots webinar, followed by a webinar about flight planning on Thursday. You'll definitely want to check out that one if you have any questions about filing with ForeFlight. That's going to be hosted by a couple of total comedians. They're really funny guys, and you'll probably get at least a few laughs out of that webinar, in addition to learning some stuff, hopefully. And finally, on Friday, we will have a What's New in ForeFlight webinar hosted by Phil. Now, you might be wondering, well, wait a minute, you just covered a lot of what's new. So what I was covering in this webinar was stuff that we've added since the start of this year. That What's New webinar will focus more on some of the stuff we added last year. So what's new in kind of a loose sense, but going back to the previous time we were at Sun and Fun and looking at some of the features we've added since then. So it should serve as a great complement to this webinar you're watching right now. And like I said already, if you have any questions, if you didn't get your question answered, or if anything pops up and you want an answer to it, just email team@foreflight.com and our support team will get back to you very quickly and we'll make sure that your question gets answered. So thanks again, everyone, and we hope to see you on the webinar tomorrow.